G'day cocktail lovers and Guten Tag Paris. It's Bastille Day, or it will be Bastille Day when I'm uploading this video. French National Day, celebrating the French Revolution, I guess. I could have looked up something more precise, quite honestly, but it's Bastille Day. A friend who owns a bottle shop says he always runs out of Calvados around Bastille Day, which is a French apple brandy, basically the French equivalent to Applejack. If you're familiar with American apple brandy, the French Calvados tends to be made with apples that are more tart, and the American Applejack tends to be made with apples that are more sweet. Having given you that little intro of Calvados, the drinks I'm making for Bastille Day do not have Calvados in them. I just thought I'd throw that little bit of knowledge in there. These are very cognac heavy drinks, one more so than the other, and there are some quite similar ingredients, partly because I'm making some substitutions, but they're in quite different ratios. So this should make for quite different drinks, even though there's crossover in the ingredients. But I have never tried either of these drinks, so I don't know how they're going to turn out. We shall learn this together. When you look up online Bastille Day or French cocktails, there was an enormous selection, not least because a large number of cocktails were invented or popularized in France. A lot of key cocktail ingredients from France or started out in France. So it's hardly surprising there's a lot to choose from. The two I went for, as I said, feature cognac quite prominently. And if you're not familiar with cognac, cognac is a double distilled spirit or liqueur, wine based. Very interesting because apparently the base wine that's used, and there are very strict rules around cognac, much like champagne, it has to be grown, the grapes have to be grown in the cognac region of France. Very specific grapes have to be used, and it has to be double distilled and aged at least 2 years to be called cognac. And you'll also see variations on the labels. There's cognac, VS, VSOP, and XO. So basically, the VS means very special, which is nice. That means the mix of grapes that's in that cognac have been distilled for at least 3 years, as opposed to the minimum of 2. VSOP stands for very special old pale. I always have to stop myself from saying either overproof when I'm thinking of alcohol, or old peculiar, which is a beer I'm familiar with. But it's very special old pale. That means the grapes are at least 5 years old. And XO, which is the most expensive one, I believe is at least 7 years aging. Possibly 10, but at least 7 years aging for XO cognac. So that's what those things mean, if that's important to you. These recipes do call for VSOP Cognac. I happen to have some VSOP Cognac. I honestly wouldn't agonize too much if I only had a VS or just plain old cognac. Or I'll be honest, brandy. Cognac is a brandy. If you've got a decent brandy, substitute that. Don't believe the people who obsess about the purity of something like cognac. That's my humble opinion. Anyway, but we'll get on with the drinks. The first one is known as Le Tour Eiffel, the Eiffel Tower. These are both stirred cocktails I'm going to make. This first one is the particularly cognac heavy one. 2.5 ounces or 75 mils of the cognac is going in this one. We're also adding 1/2 ounce of Curacao, or any orange liqueur that you have, whether it be triple sec, Cointreau, something similar. They're all going to have their own flavor profile, which will influence the drink or your top. I really like the products. This is a local Melbourne product, Marionette. These glass stoppers, I do find them quite difficult to get off without doing this, and I've done it again. So we're going to have 1/2 ounce, 15 mils of Curacao. The recipe also calls for 1/2 ounce of Gentian liqueur, which if you're like me, you may not have. It's one of the more obscure liqueurs, but there's a lot of similar profile drinks you can substitute in, and that's what I'm going to be doing tonight, substituting this rather tasty Australian herbal liqueur, Okar Gold. It is actually modelled quite a bit on the Golden European herbals. So it's a good substitute for Gentian, also a good substitute for Yellow Chartreuse, which will come in handy for the next drink. But for this drink, there's ½ an ounce of Okar Gold, or Gentian if you have it. Finally, we're adding just a dash of absinthe in there. Hope I don't tip too carelessly. And if this is sounding a little familiar to you, like, hey, cognac, dash of absinthe, sounds a bit like a Sazerac. That's actually apparently the inspiration for this drink. While it's French themed, the Eiffel Tower, it's not a French created drink. It's actually created by well-known bartender Gaz Regan, and his thinking was apparently, what if a Sazerac, which is like a French vibed down south New Orleans cocktail, what if a Sazerac, but even more French? And we've come up with this. So those are all the ingredients going in. Now I'm going to give it a quick stir, about 10 seconds, just to make sure everything's mixed and chilled. Now we strain this into a glass I've had chilling. I picked one I thought looked suitably Parisian. Ooh, look at that wash line. That's precarious. I shall bring this ever so gently to my lips. That's got a very obvious Sazerac vibe to it. There's some real depth though. The addition of a herbal liqueur and the orange from the Curacao does take it to a different level to just a straight Sazerac, which is a drink I like. Well, I guess vive la France. The second drink for Bastille Day, why not make two? It's a celebration, is known as Purgatory à la Francais, which I guess translates as to purgatory for a French person, which doesn't sound good, so hopefully the drink's better. It is another cognac drink. Where do I put my cognac? But this time it is only 1 shot rather than 2.5 shots of cognac. This recipe calls for 3/4 of an ounce of an Islay Scotch whisky, which that's the particular smoky peated Scotch whiskies, which I, again, do not have, and I'm going to substitute a different whiskey. Obviously, doing this with an Islay Scotch is going to be very different to using any other whiskey. There's a million whiskies out there, they all have their own flavour profile, so they're all going to create their own drink. I'm going to go with an Australian whiskey, Starward Twofold. Has some nice similarities to Scotch in the flavours. You get like the caramels and vanillas of a non-peated whiskey, and it's actually a particularly tasty drop. So I'm going to do 3/4 of an ounce of the Starward Twofold. Now the Okar Gold's coming back. This time it's subbing in for Yellow Chartreuse. Recipe called for 3/4 of an ounce of Yellow Chartreuse. I'm going to go 3/4 of an ounce of Okar Gold. I guess if I wanted to be a bit more chartreusey, I do have green chartreuse. I could have done ½ an ounce of Okar Gold and 1/4 of an ounce of green chartreuse, but I'm going to make my life a little simpler than that and just do 3/4 of an ounce of Okar Gold. The final ingredient in this cocktail is Punt, 3/4 of an ounce again. Ooh, I didn't realise I'd never opened this bottle before. If you're not familiar with Punt, it's an Italian aromatized wine, aka vermouth, but it's halfway between a vermouth and amaro. So it's not as full on the bitter side as a genuine amaro is, but it's got more heft to it than your average vermouth does. So it's got quite a distinctive flavour. It's quite nice. This is my second bottle. I finished the first one after a while. So 3/4 of an ounce of Punt, and then we're going to stir. This one we strain into a chilled rock glass. We've got a nice big cube of ice in there. Got a rather lovely amber colour. Actually it's darker than amber, it's really quite brown. That's the Punt coming through. All the rest of the ingredients are much lighter in colour. But it's a nice looking drink. Let's see what it tastes like. Oh, that's good. Like I said, although there's some crossover in the ingredients in these two, they're completely different drinks, which is really what you look for in cocktails. Even just in appearance, this one, the Purgatory à la Francais, is darker than Le Tour Eiffel, and while not sweet, it doesn't have the bitter edge that the Punt gives the Purgatory. And if you're like me, you maybe find some of the bitter drinks too much. Like one of the most popular cocktails around, the Negroni with Campari. Campari is actually too bitter for me. If I put something that bitter in a cocktail, I tend to use about a quarter the recommended volume in a drink and usually substitute something else to balance it because I simply find it too bitter. It's like an Australian equivalent, the Okar bitter, the Okar Amaro is, I think, a better flavour than Campari, but it's just as bitter. So it's for those who like their drinks bracingly bitter. This one just has a nice dry, slightly bitter finish on it. And it's nice to have a drink like that every now and then. And as I said, while not sweet as such, it is when next to this. So now I've got to go and decide which of these makes me feel more French. Who knows? And who knows what you'll get up to on Bastille Day. Whether you're just going a simple one like a French 75 or a French martini, or trying something a bit different. I've really enjoyed making these two. Like I said, never tried them before. I think they turned out quite well. If you enjoyed this, I hope you'll let me know. Hey, even better, let your friends know that they should be watching. If you're not already subscribed, it would be fantastic if you did subscribe. Hit the bell notification so you'll know when I upload videos. And maybe, if you like, let me know something you'd like to see in the future. Always looking for suggestions. There's a big wide world of cocktails out there, never short for inspiration either, I guess. But this is my little Bastille Day celebration. So I will say vive la France and cheers.